Hello there, and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I am your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, the founder of Utrema Limited. And yesterday, I talked about how some of the aspects of funding a indoor controlled environment agriculture setup. And it was an interview that I read by a guy called Dave Chen, who runs a large investment firm. And he's talking about how you need to have serious scale in order to be a success in hydroponics. And you need to be multiple acres and raising $20 to $30 million, all about raising funds, raising capital to give you runway, as they call it, to get your venture going. I wanted to give the other side of the argument today because I take a very different approach to business. And I am very much a proponent of something called bootstrapping, which is where you allow your company to grow organically and use the profits from your sales to drive the growth of your company. Now, the problem is that people often mistake this for a lack of ambition, but far from it. It's the exact opposite. Now, yes, your growth will not be as fast. You will not be able to make as many hires as quickly as if you were getting investment. And you're not able to move straight into swanky offices and facilities. And your sales will be less. And your budgets for things like marketing will be less. So potentially your growth will be slower. However, I think it sets you up in the long run for a more enjoyable, more successful, more sustainable, and more innovative business and venture. And I'm going to explain why. So you'll often see on LinkedIn or in the news, press releases, people celebrating investment in their startup. And you'll see people on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, as it's called in America, celebrating, trying to get people to invest in their company. And they'll have, champagne, and they'll have, big parties to celebrate this. This is not a sale. They haven't sold goods. They have just sold part of their business. And same on, the stock exchange. You list on the stock exchange, ticker tape, parade, loads of parties, brilliant. In essence, you've sold part of your company and you've lost control, but it's so much more than just losing control let's start with the control. You've lost control. You'll often see happens so many times in science-based companies you wouldn't believe. And Hydroponics is a science-based company. They convince the founder, who is currently CEO, to dilute the shares below 50%. And then they say, but you will carry on as CEO. Then that's all well and good until the investors start to get jittery about the lack of sales or the lack of even just growth in sales. And then they say, right, well, actually, we don't think you're the best person to lead this. You're more of an innovator and you're not going to be running the company from now on. And the founder is like gobsmacked and like, but it's my company. And I'm like, no, it's not, because you've sold more than 50% of your shares. And we've all clubbed together and decided you're no longer CEO. You're just a minority shareholder. And that scenario happens time and time again. You'd think people would be wary of it, but they don't, because they're convinced by investors to dilute their shares beyond that 50% point. So you lose control. That's the first thing. But it's another reason why I think bootstrapping is better than looking for investment. And that is that you lose motivation, because when something is 100% yours, you are 100% motivated to make it a success for you and your family that's going to inherit it, or when you're going to sell it and things like that. So you are 100% motivated. So the less you own of something, the less motivated you are. So control, motivation. The other reason I think bootstrapping is better, it allows for far superior product and business innovation. And that's because you can do something called serendipitous innovation. This is something that is at the heart of everything we do at Utrema. And it's only possible because I am the only person who owns any stake in the company. And I have built this company up through blood, sweat, and tears, through my hard work and innovation. And I would never sell part in the company because I know it would stifle innovation. Because serendipitous innovation involves me going to a grower or a farmer and listening to their problems and their issues and just sticking them in a cupboard in my brain. And I might come up with a solution for that in 2 years' time, 2 minutes' time, or 3 weeks. It doesn't matter. But I'll know when I've got a killer idea and I've got the correct solution to that problem. And I can suddenly go back to them and say, you know, that problem you had 5 years ago, Ian, I've got the perfect solution for it now. Or I'll be messing around in the lab, I'll find something and I'll go, you know, that's a perfect solution for that thing we were doing with Ian. So it's not laziness. I'm not waiting 5 years because I am a lazy twat. I'm waiting 5 years because I'm waiting for the best thing to come around serendipitously. Whereas if I have investors, then I need Gantt charts and aims and milestones and targets and things like this and objectives. And chafer grubs are a massive issue in golf courses. Therefore, in the next 6 months, we need to come up with a solution for chafer grubs. And therefore, in Russell, you're going to invent this product in 2 months' time, and then we're going to start manufacturing it, and we're going to do this. And you end up with a crap product. You end up with loads of issues. You end up with loads of stress. And that sort of innovation is crap. It's the reason why UK innovation's stalling at universities, because it used to be the case that lecturers just got paid and they got money for research, and they would go away to their lab and they would do the best research that they found the most interesting and was the most impactful. Whereas now they have to go to research bodies to justify, and they have to write project proposals, and they have to have Gantt charts about what they're going to do and when they're going to discover something new. You just can't do that. Proper science and proper innovation just doesn't come via Gantt charts. Worst fucking thing ever for innovation is a Gantt chart. Sorry for swearing. I know some people listen with kids in the car. So, lack of control, lack of motivation, lack of innovation. Other thing is lack of fun. Like, if I go to work and I decide, right, today we're going to go, instead of manufacturing, we're going to go and play golf. Dane, grab your clubs, we're playing golf today. We can do it. If I decide, right, we're going to do a set of top trumps, the card game for hydroponics, we're going to do it. And we did it this week. If I think we're going to start a podcast because I think that sounds like fun, we'll do that. If I decide we're going to do microgreens for 3 weeks, or hops, or anything else, we can do it. We can do whatever we think is interesting. And as long as it aligns with the goals of what, making money for Utrema, we can do it. If I decide I want to go to Madrid on a jolly with the air miles, I can do it. We can do it. We can go to Green Tech. We can go to Spanibis, all sorts of things. You can have a lot more fun if you're not answerable to shareholders and investors. So control, motivation, innovation, fun. And yes, there might be a business that requires a massive capital expense. But for every business like that, there's probably a small scale way of bootstrapping to get to that point before you have to. If something requires a massive piece of kit, you can do something aligned with that industry before you get involved with it. You don't necessarily have to think, right, we need to buy the big piece of kit, so I need to sell out my soul to somebody with money first. And then the other thing around that is you can dial back and dial in the risks depending on what you see as the current market trends at the time. Whereas if you've got investors, it can almost be like groupthink, and you get 10 people around the table and they can make a worse decision than one person on their own when it comes to the risks and things like this, because you've got to 100% own it. So there is a big risk when it comes to, just thinking about massive capital expenses. You make a very different decision if you know all the money on the table is yours. As I said, when it comes to fun, a lot of the times when it comes to bootstrapping companies, the marketing budget would previously be a big, big constraint. But as you've seen with what we do at Utrema, we've got a podcast, we do YouTube videos, we're massive on social media. So we don't need the massive physical media ads that traditionally in our sector would be relied upon. So it used to be the case that if you were in the fertilizer sector, you'd have to spend £10,000, £30,000 on an A4 advert in a journal, in a trade press, and that was money down the drain, and you'd never see the return on investment for it. And that was a big moat that the big fertilizer companies and the biostimulant companies could have around them. Whereas now, you can do completely organic media. You can do organic LinkedIn. You could do organic Twitter. You wouldn't have to pay a penny. But even if you do start paying, you can get really good results. So on the last but one episode, I talked about my idea that somebody could set up a sweet potato company growing sweet potato slips in the UK. Perfect for a bootstrap company. All the kit you could buy from a grow shop for under £2,000, I would say, and set up. And within that, you could even have some money for marketing budget, and you can market just to allotment growers in pre-spring, so not late winter. And I think that would be a fabulous idea. You wouldn't need massive newspaper adverts, things like that. And you could build that company up, and you could think of new ideas, new crops that you could sell to the similar companies. So the idea that you need to be 20 to 30 million pounds for a indoor growing facility, I think is incorrect. You can start it organically. And then there's another piece of information that shows that bootstrapping companies have long-term success. And that is one that shows that family-owned businesses survive longer than the likes of those that are on the stock market. So think of Ferrero Rocher chocolates. That is a family-owned company. They have never taken, I think they've even taken a loan out. They are 100% organically grown. Other companies like Laithwaite's, the wine company, Yorkshire Tea, owned by Betty's Tea Room. These companies are extremely good advertising and they're innovative because they are family-owned. They're not successful despite of it. They're successful because of it, because they can have an idea and the idea isn't drilled into obscurity by committee and by investors. So you think about, often you can see an advert and you can see the crumb of what was a good idea. And then it's been through 20 iterations to make it go through all the committees required to allow it to get published. Whereas a family-owned company can do what they want when they want. Like, I released a advert yesterday targeting lawn care customers, and it was going to target people in Scotland. And I think the tagline was something like, that's it. It was a humic acid product, and it was a humic acid product that isn't weak as pish, which is as close to swearing as you can get in the UK. So weak as pish is famous, like a famous Scottish saying. Now, if I had an investor, I could guarantee you I would not have allowed to run that copy. And it's the reason why Elon Musk gets away with a lot, because he is a majority shareholder. But normally you wouldn't get away with what Elon gets away with. And a famous example, when I did have investors in a previous company and when I was working for people with investment, I tried to do a video which was 7 reasons why you shouldn't grow cannabis. And it was like the reasons why was basically wasn't as economical as certain other crops. And I was told to take the video down because we're not going to tell people to grow cannabis. And I was like, no, I'm telling people not to grow cannabis. Yeah, we're not mentioning cannabis. I'm like, but it's telling people not to grow cannabis. And like, yeah, still no, you've got to take that down, Russell. I was like, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But like, that was like the first spark to the fire where there was going to, right, I'm going to set up Utrema and I'll do what the hell I want when I want to do it. So bootstrapping was the way forward. And I didn't even start the company with a lot of money. And yeah, you look back at it and you think, God, you took some crazy risks there, and you were very lucky getting some key customers when I got them. But, such is life. I've missed out on plenty of other big customers along the way. So swings and roundabouts. And so, yeah, let me know if you've got any thoughts about bootstrapping a hydroponic company and growing it into something sustainable and long term. And if you look at the list of some of the oldest companies in the world, they are invariably family owned. And because they don't go through mergers and acquisitions to satisfy shareholder value all the time. And that's another good reason, is why once you get publicly listed, a company gets publicly listed, the motivations of the people in charge become uncoupled. It's a great word, uncoupled from the aim of making profit for the company, because their take-home pay packet no longer relates to the company being profitable. Their take-home pay packet relates to providing shareholders with dividends and share price and increasing the value of the company, which is not intrinsically the same thing as profitability and long-term sustainability of the company. Just look at famous example, Dr. Martens. I'm in Northamptonshire at the moment here, and Dr. Martens is a famous Northamptonshire, I think it was family-owned shoe company, sold to a Chinese company. They reduced the quality, reduced the price, sales went up for a couple, 3 years. The management would have been heavily rewarded with bonuses for those couple of years, and then feedback from the customers was, these shoes are rubbish. And then you're in a real problem there, because you've lost the kudos of the brand. This worldwide famous shoe brand suddenly the brand is no longer worth what it was. How do you build that back up? Do you increase the quality and people still think they're going to be rubbish? Or do you stay as a sub-quality brand that you've driven it to? And so for things like fashion, that's a big issue. But lots of businesses, that uncoupling between what is profit of the business and what is the short-term goal of management are two completely different things. And that's why you see these directors, these CEOs on stupidly high salaries, and they don't deserve it, but they've locked into them, and the people who own the company can't really do anything about it. So that's my take on it. I would encourage anybody to be a bootstrapper. If you see anybody celebrating investment in their company, then I always take the opposite opinion, and I see them celebrating loss of control, loss of innovation, loss of motivation, and loss of fun. A famous example by Rory Sutherland, the marketing executive, who is always got something very interesting to say. He always talks about bees and the waggle dance. And you go to a bee colony, it's the essence of a family-owned company, isn't it? A beehive, everybody's in there with the motivation of helping everyone else. And they do the waggle dance to tell everyone else where the honey is. But what you don't realize is that 20% of all the bees seemingly ignore the waggle dance. They don't go to where the waggling bees tell them is the nectar and the pollen. And so they go off in a completely different direction. And they do that because if everybody listened to the bees that were doing the waggle dance, yes, they would, in the short term, create more honey, because they would access those pollen and nectar sources very efficiently, but they would soon run them dry, and there would be no innovation in where they're going for the pollen and nectar. And so in family-run businesses, that ability to just devote 20% into interesting innovation, serendipitous innovation, is what actually makes these companies thrive. And it's the competitive advantage against these people who are getting investment from external sources. So I think it's an interesting topic. Might be a bit dry for some people, but I think it applies to hydroponics, but it also applies to people growing in, doing things like insect protein and insect rearing. I had a conversation with a person on LinkedIn. They posted a picture of them in an empty warehouse, and they were saying they're shutting down Beer Bar Limited, and they were looking for investment, but it's a very different world now, and they couldn't get the investment, and so they had to close the company down. And so I said, you needed funding to scale faster than organic growth, but if you didn't secure it, why did you have to wind the business up? And they said that they were a startup built on equity investment that is capital expenses intensive. and organic growth is not economically feasible for us. And so really, as soon as they took the investment, unless they were very successful, it was the death knell in their company. And how quickly things can unravel is scary for a lot of these startup businesses. And they could have had very long-term successful businesses employing a lot of people. You've just slowed down and didn't actually see the motivation as getting investment. And a lot of people spend their lives trying to get investment, and it's really easy. Like, I could have started numerous companies getting investment from the City of London or Wall Street, but I knew that it's not long-term what I was interested in, because I'm interested in building a sustainable company. And really, you can be focused. The top 5 people in these companies can be focused on just getting more and more investment, and not focused at all about selling a product and making a profit. And for me, that's what it's all about, is solving people's problems and then them rewarding me for it and having the best ecologically sound solution for them. And if that sounds interesting, then check out utrema.co.uk, because we've got a portfolio of products that are all completely unique, have all been generated by serendipitous innovation. And if you have any issues with them, or if you've got any questions, then you can contact me at Utrema. If you found this interesting, then please do give us a podcast review on Apple. That would help share the podcast tremendously. Or if you're not on Apple, don't bother leaving a review. It doesn't help us. But just make sure you follow the podcast so that you don't miss an episode. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.